Hello, and welcome to an intro to Anthro with two humans. I'm human number one, John McCray.
And I'm human number two, John Lehr.
And this is the podcast where we reassess what it means to be human. And the title of this episode is Redlines and Reindeers, a Christmas story for a supposedly post-racial world. And John, I know you love long titles, so you must be loving this one.
I do. I keep waiting for Podbean to not give me any more characters, but so far we're okay.
Maybe we could pay extra. We could pay extra for that. But you have to have the colon in there. You know, the colon makes you academic. You put the colon
it does.
In there, so.
Yes, it does.
So anyway, we've discussed some very controversial topics on this podcast. It hasn't been around long, but we've dealt with some biggies. We've dealt with
we haven't shied away.
Yeah. We've dealt with contraception, same-sex marriage, an entire episode on masturbation.
Very controversial. Who's on the other side of masturbation? I want to talk to them.
I don't know.
Anti-masturbation.
I know. Who's the liar? That's what I say.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And we talked about Bigfoot. And none of those topics drove this podcast into the ground. So I think we've dealt with them, respectfully and intellectually. And
agreed. And the numbers prove it. We continue to grow. We're on our way to 3,000 downloads.
Wow.
Yup.
Wow. Thank you,
by
everybody.
By the time of this podcast, it will have hit 3,000, which, isn't a lot compared to the big guys. But
yeah,
I always say, you got to have 3,000 before you have 3,001. You know what I mean?
Amen to that. Mm-hmm. Glass half full. He's always a glass half full. But this one might kill us. This episode might kill us. Because in this episode, we're going to talk about race. And this is probably the most culturally sensitive topic that we've dealt with so far.
Yeah.
So, but it's a big one. And I think that everybody in this country still needs to talk about race. I know there are certain places in the country where they're passing laws where you can't talk about race because it makes certain people uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But I think we still need to talk about. We're not there yet. We're not there.
You can't really have a podcast on anthropology without talking about race and racism.
Right.
There's no way. So
yeah.
We're still in our early stages of a podcast, but we've got to lay the groundwork. Yeah. You can't build a house on soft, sandy ground. You've got to get cement. You've got to dig in there. I don't know what you do. Rebar. You got to have rebar.
You have very, very complicated metaphors for everything, but I love it. But we need to, this topic, we're going to need to tread lightly, you and me, because
we're two old white dudes.
Right, exactly. Right. And if there's any group of people who hasn't a clue about racism, real racism, it's old white guys.
Yep, that's right.
And I know, like, a lot of old white guys like to moan about reverse racism, which is apparently when people of color discriminate against them. But I'd
like to honestly see the numbers on that one.
Yeah, me too.
It's like my friends who are like old white dudes who are like in Hollywood who are like, people, it's really hard to get a job now. And I'm like, dude, it's big because there's so much diversity hiring going on in Hollywood. And I'm like, dude, it's been hard for you to get a job for 3 seconds. Okay. Can you hold off on the complaining?
Yeah.
It's been, thousands of years. Let's for women and, whatever. So can you hold off till maybe you got like an hour of having trouble getting a job?
Yeah. Yeah. But that's what I find too, because it's like the difference between reverse racism and real racism is reverse racism. You could just get in your car and 2 blocks later, you're out of it. You know what I mean? You go back and you're the predominant culture again. Like real racism, you can't get away from it. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. As you know,
so
in my production company, we have 3 partners, and my 2 other partners are Latinx. They're one gay Latino, one straight female Latina, and me.
yeah,
And they always joke around that I am the diversity hire of Triple Threat
that's
Media.
great. That's great. Yeah, I'm all for. I'm like, look, culture just goes where it wants to go, and you can't control it. If that's what it is. You got to nut
Well,
up, nut up.
that's
I
what's
think.
so interesting about the culture wars. There's no winning. It's like there's this culture war going over here, and then way over here is culture itself, and they really
Yeah,
have nothing to do with each other.
yeah, yeah. So I just want to say right up front, though, before we start discussing this topic, that I myself have no. I'm not trying to claim that I know anything about real racism.
Yes.
I was a poor guy growing up. I had challenges, but I was still a white guy in America, and that gave
Yeah.
me certain advantages.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I'm just saying that I don't know what it's like to be the on the other end of real racism. So
And at the same time, by no means are either of us trying to say we're not racist. We may be trying our best out there, but we
yeah,
fully recognize that the biggest mistake a white person can make is say I'm not racist,
right.
because
Because
it's just not true. There's just no,
yeah,
it's empirically not true.
and
So
it's in there. It's in
yeah,
there.
it's deep.
So
It's deep.
yeah. And so have you? I'll ask you. Have you ever experienced racism? Have you ever been the victim of racism?
Well, no, but I have experienced anti-Semitism. And
Really?
yes, and as because I'm a Jewish convert, um, and I've experienced anti-Semitism. For instance, I've been in Jewish situations
Yeah.
where other Jews make it clear to me that I'm not, quote, really a Jew.
Really?
Yeah, that's happened a few
Really?
times. Yeah. Yeah. So but no, I don't experience anything close to yeah,
Yeah.
no. Mm-mm.
That's true. Anti. I have to
Isn't
write
that
that one
crazy?
out. I have to write that
Yeah.
one out.
I've
That's
just
like
had
a
people kind of make it clear that since I was converted, I'm not really a Jew.
right. Right.
Which of course is just,
Yeah.
if you dig, all you got to do is dig down one layer to point out how stupid that kind of
yeah.
point of view is
Yeah.
coming from a Jew. Like just
Yeah.
the utter tunnel vision.
Right. Right. I think the only time I've ever had anything close to real racism was when I was working for the Italian government.
Mm,
And when I worked for the Italian government in Chicago, there were like two or three Americans that were always in Chicago running the office, and then they would send over Italians from Italy, would come over on like a tour of duty, so to speak.
yeah, but
And
the Americans running the office were Italian Americans, right?
no, they
Oh,
were
I thought they
well, one
were.
was like half Italian American, the other one was, and then there were some Italian Americans,
Oh, okay.
then another American woman, and then me. But the thing is, there were real fascists had come over. And by real fascists, I mean like these were guys, older guys, because I was working there in the late 80s, early
Mm-hmm.
90s. These were guys that had grown up in Italy under Mussolini.
Mm-hmm.
So they had
Jesus.
been like, one of them had been like one of Mussolini's wolf cubs, which is like the fascist
Really?
boy scouts. Yeah.
Right, like the brown shirts in Nazi
Right.
in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and
The
they would
wolf
always, it
cub.
wasn't,
Jesus
oh, yeah,
Christ.
they were like Boy Scouts. So you had the black
Mm,
shirts, but you also had the Wolf Cubs, which were like the little kids when you would
right.
indoctrinate the
Yeah.
little kids.
Yeah.
And he had been one when he was growing up in Italy in the
Jesus.
30s. But
Oh
the thing
man.
is, they always, nothing against me personally, but they always made it a point to note that they didn't like Italian money going to a non-Italian. So,
Mm.
and I don't know, it's nothing compared to what other people go through. But again, uh, I just realize how, I don't know, how it makes you feel, I guess, is
Yeah.
the whole thing when there's nothing you
D-
can do.
Right, the complete injustice, and you're just totally. It has nothing to do with you personally. Yeah,
Right.
it's just yeah.
But I did remember I wrote a play in the late 90s that was called The Rise and Fall of Benito Mussolini as told by circus clowns.
Great play. Highly recommend it. I have it on my computer. To this day. I think I do. Or maybe I have the hard copy. I don't even know. Wait, maybe I don't have. I have a whole file of all of the stuff you've written on my computer that gets passed on to my next laptop that I just have. But maybe that isn't digitized. Maybe it was just paper. I have a box of your stuff somewhere too.
Yeah. Remember we did, you were at the reading, right? We did a reading in Venice one time. And
yeah.
I
played like 9 roles, I think, or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, because it was all roles. Clowns. Clowns would play all the different roles, but it just kind of shows you, anybody that thinks that fascism's good has never really experienced real fascism. And it just kind of shows you how it starts out funny. You can't believe it. You can't believe it that people are actually saying that, doing that.
Yeah.
And then after so many years, you're just like, just stop. This is exhausting. And people are getting killed because of this.
Yeah.
And ironically, I had written it as a cautionary tale, but it may be too late.
It didn't caution anybody.
I know.
Way to go! You failed us on that.
Yeah,
playwright, art, and theater didn't help us out through that.
Right. So anyway, let's move on. In her book, The Myths That Made America: An Introduction to American Studies, Heike Paul, who's a professor in Germany, and I always find that sometimes you have to go to another country and look at their professors and their universities and how they're looking at America to get a good view of what actually is going on.
Hell yeah. They all think we're idiots for paying how much we pay for university, you know?
Yeah.
That's the thing I get, because my daughter just got into Bard. And my friends who are from Europe are just like, Jesus, you know how much I paid for school?
Yeah.
$200 a year or something like that.
Yeah. That was when I was in France. That was the thing. They all went on strike about the tuition increase, and I was out there marching with them. And then after about like 4 months, somebody told me, and I did the calculation. It was going up from like $25 a semester to $30 a semester.
Yeah, we're just getting scammed over here.
Yeah.
Medical insurance and school. There's some major scams going down.
Yeah. I'm happy for it. That's a good school, though. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Did you buy the T-shirt already?
Not yet. I can't afford it.
What's their mascot? Do they have a mascot?
Yeah, they do. They're the Raptors.
Ooh, nice.
I'm just gonna get one of my white Hanes shirts and draw my own Bard T-shirt with a raptor on it.
She'll love that. Go to the football games with it. Do they have a football team?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So anyway, Heike Paul, in the book, The Myths That Made America, she looks at some of the myths that Americans hold about themselves. And for example, she looks at Christopher Columbus and the myth of discovery, the myth of the melting pot, and the myth of the American West. And I think we'll have to come back to this book because this book is really good. And it fits into what we're doing.
I'm surprised she doesn't have the myth of freedom, you know, that a country that puts freedom as our top descriptor was actually built on slavery. Like, you know, that's sort of the you know, the inner sanctum of the darkness of America, you know?
Yeah.
We are a country of freedom, and we had slaves for 200 years.
Yeah. So
it's like,
I'll have to look into. Yeah, that's the irony of it, and you can't get around that.
Yeah, that's our core thing, I think. With our country.
And there was a lot of wordplay and a lot of finagling that went into the early days of this country to kind of justify that and try to say why that was why that
all men are free, except for some of them, and the women are not as well.
Well, she does talk about the myth of expressive individualism and the myth of the self-made man.
Yes.
And this is the myth that if you work hard in America, you can become whatever you want. and be whoever you want to be.
Right.
And this, she says, this grew out of the Calvinist work ethic that, you know, came with all the colonists and all the settlers.
God,
that came
those
over
Calvinists, they really screwed us up.
Yeah,
I mean, they really did a number on us. Those Jeremiads.
Yeah,
the Calvinists.
It's brutal. It's brutal.
It is.
Yeah. Not very fun Christmas parties.
No, nothing. No joy at all.
So anyway, while this is true in theory that, you know, anybody here in America can work hard and become whoever they want, we all know through looking at history that there are a lot of people in America can't become whatever they want, no matter how hard they work. So, and in fact, for a large part of American history, women and people of color were legally prohibited from becoming whatever they wanted. And, you know, really, like you've already mentioned, this idea of working hard and becoming whatever you wanted really only applied to white men for most of our history.
Yeah. And white men who owned property.
Right.
Like white, you know, of a certain financial level.
Right. And so they say that the term the self-made man
were not part of even though we were white men. Our people were not.
Know. I don't know.
The Irish, I trace my family roots back. It ain't pretty.
Yeah. Mine is always stories about like they sold the property or traded it for a wagon, and then the next people hit oil on it. So, you know,
I have that myth in my family.
Yeah. Yeah. It always just gets worse and worse, like less and less and less as you go down. So, but the term the self-made man is actually credited to Henry Clay, who was a senator from Kentucky in the early 1800s. And Clay wrote, quote, "In Kentucky, almost every manufactory known to me is in the hands of enterprising self-made men who have whatever wealth they possess by patient and diligent labor," unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think about who was in charge of Kentucky in the 1830s, it was white men. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So the myth was already building up of like, oh, well, they just really worked hard. But it's like, well, like half the population, probably more than half the population, couldn't even compete with them. You know what I mean?
Weren't even allowed on the playing field.
Yeah. And so I find from my experience, this myth of the self-made man is still with us today. And you'll find that like white men, nothing gets old white man madder than if you say that he had certain advantages to get where he was at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, and I
pulled myself up by my own bootstraps. Well, yeah, but you had bootstraps.
Yeah, and you were white.
That's what I'm saying. The bootstraps were that you were white.
Yeah, and you even see like billionaires are that way too. They get really mad if people say like, "Well, it would have been a little bit harder if you were a woman or a person of color." Oh no, they really flip out about it.
Yeah.
So, but you know, I'm just like, come on, you just got to be honest. I mean, let's just be honest about it.
I think it's like, you know, you have to do so much evil shit to get rich that the one thing is like, well, I did it myself. You know, I did it that's like the golden ring and all the money. But to justify all the evil shit you did, because you really have to screw people. I mean, you know, that's just the way it is to get to a certain level. You know, people have to suffer in order for you to make more money. And you know, that's just the way it is. And so I think that gives them some moral standing. Well, I did it all. I earned my money by myself. No. And then if you point that out, then because then they realize, well, you know, I'm just kind of a dark dude who just really wanted money.
Yeah. I always hate when they like billionaires too. They're always like, wow, the social media is always coming out and hating us. Like, and it's like, look, you're already getting all of our money. Do we have to actually love you for it too? You know?
Yeah, give us a break. That's what I'm saying. You know, Bezos and all the guys who are putting all the stuff on the, you know, the rockets. I think they should take all of our trash to the sun. Let's make him our trash man. That's what you get. When you get so rich, you can build a rocket. You have to haul our shit into the sun.
Yeah. And like any trash man, there should be like a phone call that people can just call to the city and complain about it.
Yeah.
About their complaints. Let me talk to Bezos.
I want an Amazon truck coming by to pick up my old couch.
Yeah. Where is he? Put me through. Don't try to stonewall me. So in her book, Race and Racisms, A Critical Approach, the sociologist Tanya Golash discusses white privilege, which she defines as the advantages inherent in being categorized as white. And what she says is that privilege is often hard to notice. If you are white, it can be difficult to notice that you are not being followed around the store, that people are smiling at you on the street instead of clutching their purses, that no one asks you to speak English, that you are not asked for identification when paying with a credit card.
This is I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is what I try to explain to my white relatives or friends who say, I don't see any privilege. I don't have any. Well, that's what it is. It's stuff you can't see. Right. And it's like a dot on a piece of paper being able to see up. If you could see it, if it were in your face and you could see it every day and it was empirical, then yes, you would have an easier time walking away from it. But that's the nature of it. It's unknown to you. It's a blind spot.
Right. And it's just built. I'm not blaming anybody for that. I'm just saying it's there. All right.
Right.
It's there.
I don't get it.
She actually continues, which exactly what you were saying. Instead, you are likely to think that if you're white, you're likely to think that these things are normal, that this is simply how things are.
Right.
And then she notes that few whites notice that they are treated better than non-whites, and most are unlikely to attribute that better treatment to privilege. Privilege is largely invisible to those who have it, which is exactly what you were just saying.
It's hard to see. It's really hard to see when the world is just open. Like really good-looking people, they don't realize all the stuff they get because they're so hot. You know, you'll be talking to them, and I was talking to this gorgeous actress. I shot something on Tuesday. This woman is just gorgeous, great, super talented. And we were talking about getting pulled over, and she's like, "Yeah, I never get a ticket. They always let me off." And I'm like, They always ask me. She's like, "I've just been lucky," and I'm like, "No, you're not lucky."
Yeah.
You're not
I don't know what people are complaining about.
Yeah.
What people are worried about getting pulled over.
Yeah. I get asked to get out of the car.
Yeah.
And if you're black, you're handcuffed immediately.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best of it.
I don't blame her, though. She can't see it. It's her experience, you know?
Right.
It's hard. It's a subjective experience. I mean, an objective, it's hard to be subjective about it. You can't be.
And I don't know. It takes a lot out of people to step outside themselves and see the bigger world, I think.
Yeah.
Like everybody just wants it.
You have to here's the big thing. You have to come to a place where you trust that other people, their point of view is right. You know?
Yeah.
And that's, I don't understand. Like if a bunch of people of a certain race, color, or sex or whatever are telling you something, why would you disagree with that?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
And I had somebody one time, someone who said to me, well, there's a black guy at work and he thinks that the Black Lives Matter movement's stupid. And I was like, did you even think about what you just said? I go, you said there's one black guy at work and all the white guys are asking what he thinks. What do you think he's going to say? Are you guys, blind or stupid or what?
I picked a booger and it was dry. And so I'm shocked when one comes out that's not.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think you can blame people. It's just the way it is, but we're all trying to get better, I guess is what I'm.
Yeah. Maybe it's our self-loathing. We know we're such idiots, you and me.
Yeah.
That we're more open to the idea of being wrong.
Possibly. I've been wrong on most things in my life. Maybe that's why.
I've been wrong at 99% of the things I've done in my life.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
So I'm less likely to put an opinion forward that I just totally 100% stand by.
Yeah. I'm not hung up on it. In fact, I'm like, old white guys have run this place for 400 years. Let somebody else do it. You know what I mean?
Tell me what to do.
Yeah. I don't want to think anymore. Just forget about me, But anyway, we are supposedly living in a post-racial world. And that idea of being in a post-racial world actually came out in the 70s. And it was supposedly that, after the civil rights movement, we had moved beyond race and racial inequality. And therefore, people could go and think about other things besides race.
Mm-hmm.
And the sociologist Raul Perez says that in a post-civil rights society, people often avoid public race talk, and people are generally uncomfortable with public racial discourse.
Yeah.
And as a result, people maintain that they are colorblind, that they do not notice race, and that race no longer matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think you see that a lot.
Conversation. You stop the conversation. And yeah.
So, but one of the things that Golash Boza says is, how is it possible that racial inequality is widespread when most whites claim that there is no racism and that they are not racist? It's a good question. Like, you ask most white people, they'll be like, I'm not racist. I'm not racist.
That means you're racist. That's like what you say, if somebody says all the time they're not gay. That means they're gay.
Yeah. If you're making a point of it.
If you're making a point, if you're really confident of something, chances are it's the opposite, at least in my experience.
And one of the examples that people use to demonstrate colorblind racism is by using the idea of equal opportunity or freedom of choice to explain why there is still economic and racial equality. And so this argument would say something like, well, Black people are still living in poor neighborhoods and they still have lower paying jobs because they choose to be there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like, you're no longer talking about the race. It now becomes like, oh, everybody has a choice to do it. Right. And they're just choosing to be
if they just worked harder or whatever. Yeah.
And then and of course it doesn't consider the systemic factors of racism or systemic racism. And then the sociologist Eduardo Bonilla Silva has also noticed that there are several rhetorical strategies that white people use when they are using colorblind racism. And what he says is that these rhetorical strategies create a little room to where people can say something racist without actually feeling racist. So you'll hear things like, I'm not a racist, but, and then ... And then they come out with something really racist. You know what I mean? It's like,
but why does everybody? Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, I think white comedians use it. We talked about that in the comedy episode, but I think people use that all the time. It's just a way of like, I'm not a racist, but do you ever notice why?
Yes. Yeah. You see that a lot in the latte liberal scene.
Really?
Yeah. I had a friend of my daughter's friend's dad.
Yeah.
Who was talking about homelessness in LA.
Yeah.
And he looked me straight in the eye and said he had the solution, which is to build a town out in the desert and find out what their skills are and have them all work in their own community. And I said, well, okay, are they allowed to leave the town? And he's like, no, they'd have to stay there. And I'm like, so you're talking about a camp?
Yeah,
and
concentration.
Like, and he's Jewish. He's Jewish. And I'm like, I don't know about a camp.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, you don't think, it's just kind of like think a little bit or something. And not to mention, it's like they are in their community right now. But,
right.
We were up in Santa Fe one time, and somehow we used to get invited to this person's house, and she had a lot of money, and her female roommate had a lot of money, and we were at dinner there one time, and somebody at the dinner who also extremely wealthy was telling us about what they loved about Santa Fe was the income diversity. And I was like, income diversity? I go, anywhere else in the world, people would call that income inequality. You know what I mean? But it's just like, talk about just putting a spin on it. Is like
it's
income
good for my
diversity.
kids to be around poor people.
Yeah,
it shows them what they shouldn't be.
Right. The other thing about colorblind racism is the sociologist Jennifer Mueller says that cultural or colorblindness is about culturally sustaining an ignorance useful for cloaking and reproducing the contemporary structural mechanics of a white supremacy that is now centuries old.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think out of the 70s was just exhaustion, and white exhaustion, and so you create this structure that, well, we did it, that's done, let's move on, which everybody wants. I mean, same with the homeless thing. It's like, there have always been homeless people. Ever since there's been civilization, there's been homeless people. So they're talking about getting rid of the homeless situation is almost at the get-go misunderstanding it,
Yeah. And I remember I used to work for that homeless newspaper in LA, and I don't wish homelessness on anybody. Ugh. People don't realize how hard homelessness is. Yeah. So, but that's for another episode, I guess.
Yes.
We'll have to do. So anyway, John, people might be asking, why are we bringing this up now?
Yeah, good work. My podcast partner wants to torch our podcast.
It's the holidays. It's almost Christmas.
Yeah.
Why do we want to make people feel uncomfortable?
Yes.
Now.
Good. I'm nauseous.
That's what I enjoyed. This is the last one, baby. This is the last one. And the reason is it's because it was Christmas of 1973 was the first time that I personally, as a human being, became conscious of race. So this is the 50th anniversary.
So you were 8, right?
Like seven years old.
All right. Here we go.
Yeah. Now,
73.
before that time, of course, I'd been a fan of Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, which, looking back on it, that it was good at the time. Yeah,
it's riddled with all kinds of connotations now.
Yeah.
With Cosby too. Jesus.
Right. But
yes.
But I mean, I loved Rudy. I loved Mushmouth. I loved all the guys.
And Albert, you didn't love Albert?
I loved Albert as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Goes without saying. Without saying.
I mean, he's the centerpiece.
I would watch Soul Train after because it came on right after the cartoons in Kansas City.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And remember how the Soul Train, the intro to Soul Train was a cartoon.
Yeah.
Remember it was that
crazy locomotive that got soulful as it pulled into the station. That thing was cool.
Every week it would give me. I thought it was another cartoon.
Right. So you just hang on.
Yeah.
Well,
and they'd be like,
point, you didn't have much to your life, so that was anything that was Technicolor and two-dimensional was like better than
right. Just to keep watching it. I didn't care. Yeah. But anyway, you had so I would watch Soul, and Soul Train always looked so much more fun than American Bandstand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it did.
Yeah.
And if you could compare Don Cornelius with what's his face, the guy on American Bandstand.
Yeah. What was it?
I can't remember his name.
Clark.
Dick Clark.
Dick Clark.
To compare those two, there was no comparison. No. And I was happy when I was back recently at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Don Cornelius had just been inducted for like a lifetime.
Really? Is he still? Yeah. He's not still alive, is he?
No. He committed suicide, I think.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
But it was just so great to see Don Cornelius
cool?
in there.
Jesus
he was
Christ,
super
was
cool. Super cool. And in junior high, I had some friends that were, becoming more openly racist because it was like Kansas or Kansas City and Missouri in the 70s. So it was like, if you were white, there was racism that would always come out.
Yeah.
But really, my family wasn't aggro racist, wasn't openly racist. We were just kind of ordinary, run of the mill, oblivious, systemic racist. Mm-hmm. Where you don't really know that you're the advantages that you have.
I think we we were part that, and then my mom was also a hardcore socialist activist.
Yeah.
So we also had this sort of, I think at the time, and I don't blame my mother for this, but what you're talking about, hey, we're conquering racism. We're moving forward into,
Yeah. It was just messy. It was a messy time for race. It's still a messy time for race.
Yeah.
But it was right before Christmas 1973 when I was 7 years old and in second grade at Ridgeview Elementary School in Prairie Village, Kansas. So I hadn't even moved over to Overland Park yet. Okay, so
this is before me. This is before
me. This was before you. Yeah.
Yep.
And you think about Prairie Village. I mean, it sounds like Little House on the Prairie or something, but it kind of shows you this idealized vision of what the developers had for that community, And so one day my teacher sent me home with a note saying she wanted to see my mom. She needed to talk to my mom. And I was like, you can imagine you're scared. Like, why? Yeah. Why do they have to? What did I do? Yeah. What did I?
What's going on? Right. Good.
Right. And so one evening, my mom goes to school for a parent-teacher conference. And when she finally comes home, she's taking off her gloves and everything because it's almost Christmas. It's cold. So I'm like trying to play cool, like nothing's the matter. Like I'm not worried about it at all. And so she finally gets everything off and she sits down and she says, well, they want you to be the lead in the school Christmas play.
Oh my God. I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah. Well, I was like, first of all, I was like, whew, because I thought well, I had done something wrong.
Right.
And then I was like, well, this could be a good thing, the lead, the best role in the school Christmas play. And I say, well, what is it? What's the play? And she says, Elvin the Little Black Elf. So I was like, now, I was in second grade, but I still realized there was something wrong about this.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my God.
And I'm going to try to tell this story. I'm just being tactfully. I'm just telling the story about how it was.
Spill the tea. It's the facts.
Yeah. So the first thing is, I'm not black. Obviously, what's that? That was my first question. And my mom said, yeah, but the school says that's the name of the play, and they're not changing it.
Okay, so you immediately thought that elves had white elves and black elves and possibly and all of the colors in between, all of the shades in between.
Well, yeah, because it's like it sticks out when you say Elvin the Black Elf.
Yeah, it does. I guess initially for a nanosecond I went to like the Black Knight.
Right.
Like maybe he just wears a black suit, but he's not a black person. But I guess
yeah. It was confusing, but you could see as a 7-year-old, I'm like, I'm not black. What's going on? But apparently, like that was the name of the play, and the music teacher or somebody was like, I'm just staying true to the text. I'm not changing anything.
Burning what I mean? Crosses on the weekend. Jesus.
And then the next thing that came up to me is like, why couldn't they get a black kid to play the role? If it calls for a black character, why not have a black kid play it? And my mom said, well, there's no black kids at your school. And that's true. There was no black kids at Ridgeview Elementary School in 1973 at all. And so in a sense, it was like I was saving the Christmas play.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because somebody had to play the role of Elvin the Black Elf. And my mom, my mom would always push me into things. I'm not blaming my mom for this, but it was like I was 7. But was always trying to get me to do things that she thought would open doors for me later.
Yeah.
And so did you ever do cotillion? Do you remember cotillion?
Oh, God. Oh. Yeah, she was. Well, we weren't as poor as you guys, but we also by no means had money. We had money for a nanosecond, and then my dad blew it all. But
we'll tell that story later. Yeah,
I mean, we had more money than you guys did, but we were still,
Yeah.
But yeah, cotillion was a way to get the poor kids to intermingle with the rich kids.
Yeah,
I think that's the way our parents saw it. So that we could have the same opportunities.
Yeah, so the poor kids would, or it was cotillion was a thing where junior high kids would go to dances, and
Oh,
they
it
would
was
rent out like a
horrid.
ballroom at the hotel or something.
You'd
And the
get a
idea
dance
was that,
card. You'd get a
oh,
dance card with like 12 slots, and each slot was a dance, and they had
yeah,
filled in 3 of them for you. The first and the
yeah,
last was your date, and they decided
yeah,
that, I think. And then they
yeah,
threw in
yeah,
a random one in the middle. And then before the dance, you had to walk around and ask girls if they would be in dance
yeah,
number 6 with you
yeah.
or 5. And they would, many of them would just be like, no. And you'd
Yeah,
be like, oh, okay. And then you'd go and have to ask somebody else, It
yeah,
was
yeah.
just horrid.
Yeah, it was
Horrid.
awful. And it always broke down to like all the rich popular kids were always
Yes.
just dancing with the
And
rich popular kids.
and all
And
the substrata underneath this. It was like lining
yeah.
you up from valuable to the lowest value in terms of all of the, things. And
Yeah.
you'd find it. You knew exactly where you fit in the pecking
Right.
order. Which girls would
Right.
say yes because they were desperate.
Yeah. And I just remember it always ended up with me and all my nerdy friends just hiding out in the bathroom.
Yeah.
You go into the bathroom, the boys' bathroom, the men's bathroom, and just be full of guys in there who like didn't have empty like.
You'd get caught. You'd get caught because there would be a girl looking for a date and they'd look at her card and then they'd come find you.
You have to have a lookout. You got to put some guy out in the hallway that'd be like, okay, everybody, wash your hands. Act like you're washing your hands and get back out there.
God, it was horrible.
But anyway, but my mom was kind of excited about that. I had the lead in the school play. Yeah. And so anyway, they put me in some lederhosen that my aunt and uncle had brought back from Germany. They put me in, they put some charcoal on my face, which, is awful. Put it like a Santa hat on top of me. And I played Elvin, the Little Black Elf in 1973 at the Christmas play at Ridgeview. And I think the audience was kind of confused, honestly, when I came out, I think, because I looked more with the charcoal. I looked more just kind of like Elvin, the dirty elf. You know what I mean? Just like I had been like.
Oh, because it wasn't like they covered your entire face in blackface.
Right.
They just kind of.
Yeah.
Certain swaths of black.
Right.
Jesus.
It was, fortunately, it wasn't blackface, and I didn't have to do an accent or anything.
Jesus.
I mean, in that sense, the production was very classy, I guess I would say.
And video cameras weren't available.
Right. Thank
Jesus
God.
Christ.
But I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of Elvin, the Little Black Elf.
No,
or not.
I've never heard of it. Never heard of it. We got to find out this music teacher who submitted it and really wanted it played in the original. Who is that guy and what was going on and how did it get approved and what the fuck?
Yeah. It was strange at the time, but in October 1971, there was a local Kansas City songwriter named Carl Bolte Jr. And Carl Bolte Jr. wrote a song called Elvin, the Little Black Elf. Okay. That was recorded by a local Kansas City music group called the Classmen.
Boy. Oh, Jesus. Oh, let's run background checks on all of the members of the Classmen.
Well, they put it out locally on a 45. And you can still see it. You can go online and find it. But it's like,
God.
It is cheesy. It is a cheesy song. And Elvin has like that kind of high pitched like chipmunk voice. You know what I mean?
What's the story of the song? What happens to him?
Well, the idea is that all of Santa's elves had grown too fat to go with Santa on his sleigh ride. And so only Elvin, the little black elf, has stayed thin enough to help Santa.
So the only reason he got to be of help is because all the white ones were
they got too fat.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah. So anyway, Elvin, the little black elf, volunteers to help Santa, and he ends up saving Christmas. So it's basically the red-nosed Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, only instead of a reindeer, it's a black elf.
Because Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was trademarked. That was not probably. Public domain.
Yeah.
God.
But apparently, somebody at the school saw it, heard that song being played on the radio or wherever. I don't know where you'd hear it. and loved it so much that they adapted it into a play.
Oh my God.
And I ended up playing Elvin the Black Elf.
Oh
the little
my
black
God.
elf. And when I was researching this online, because I was like, I wonder if anybody, if that's written about anywhere. And I went online and I did find in 1984, which was like 11 years after I played the role, Bolte released an album of Elvin the Little Black Elf.
No way. So, and that was the title of the album?
That was the title of the album.
How many years later? 11?
11 years later, yeah.
That's the only part of this that I can relate to. You know, you re-release your tired old shit trying to make a buck.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe, I was workshopping. I like to think maybe I was workshopping the piece at that time, or maybe he was workshopping it.
Well, I've got one big note for him.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, we didn't tour. I know we didn't take it. We didn't take it off Broadway or anything, or go up and down the East Coast. But it's but the thing is, I tried to make it my own. You know what I mean? It's like I was 7 years old, and you're stuck in there playing the lead.
You had to memorize all the lines.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember one time I was like holding up a scroll, which was supposed to be like Santa's list or something. I was reading off of the scroll. When I set it down, the whole audience started laughing. And you know that feeling when you're doing a performance
and it's not intentional.
Yeah.
Something's up.
Yeah.
Your fly's undone or something.
Yeah.
Yes, I do know that feeling. God, yeah, I know that feeling.
So even at 7, I knew, like, wait a second, there's not supposed to be a laugh there. And I looked down, and it's because they'd given me a blank piece of paper,
Oh,
so
they saw that
they
could tell it was blank.
Yeah,
they were laughing at the fact that you had broken the fourth wall. You had inadvertently like shattered the fiction.
Right. And I remember even
Hilarious.
At 7, I was like thinking to myself, really, guys, that's what you're gonna laugh at, Didn't you, speaking of flies being done, didn't you and Roger one time, like, your fly was done during a performance? Or
Yes, I had a comedy partner, and we were doing in a club in Chicago, and people were laughing weirdly, and afterwards we realized he had his fly down the whole time.
Yeah, if you hear them laughing,
of course, now I'd take my fly down in a second. If it got me a gig, oh yeah, sure. You want to laugh at me? Yeah, bring it.
Remember in Billy Budd in high school, there was that scene where the dummy was thrown out of the crow's nest, and it was supposed to be a guy falling to his death from the crow's nest.
That was awesome.
And in one performance of that, I remember that the dummy hit and then bounced up and was sitting up, staring out at the audience, and he had a Clorox bottle for a head.
Really? I don't remember that.
Yeah, because you weren't in that
focused on the performance. Okay, I was in character, not just looking around at Clorox heads.
Well, I had to go out there. My character had to go out there and like, lay down, man.
Yes.
Look at yourself.
And you had to stand at attention. You were the Marine, right? The guard.
Yeah.
And but I was the horrid. I can't remember. I was bad guy. I think.
Yeah.
That was good.
But anyway, John, this just shows you. So I played the role but for years after that, people would always, like family members or people at school would always be like, "Hey, you're gonna play Elvin the Black Elf this year, John?" Or like, "Oh, John played Elvin the Black Elf in second grade." It was just something that like I took with me after that.
When did it shift to holy shit, that was utterly racist stuff? Like when did it dawn on you? I mean, I know you always felt it, but like when did it become overt in your family and everybody around that holy shit?
I think it was a few years after that.
Yeah.
Like by the time I got it over to Overland Park, it was definitely like there was something going on with that.
Yeah. My God. Makes me want to delve into that guy. I want to find out that guy who got it and how he got it through. How the principal, I mean, Amazing.
Well, that's the thing is because I've always wondered, like, how did this get made? And like, obviously people realized there was something about making the elf black, the lead elf black. And why single out his ethnicity is what I want to know. And people were, I've come across on that album jacket that I found online for this, that somebody put a photo of the back of the album cover on it. And it actually says, "Here is a new tradition, the first and only Black Christmas hero ever." So I'm wondering, like, did they think they were trying to do a good thing? I'm just trying to understand it. Like, were they trying to do a good thing?
Well, was the songwriter black?
No, he was white.
Okay.
White.
Well, then, question answered.
Yeah. But then I'm like, well, maybe this was a way to subtly introduce black characters to
I don't think. I mean, he could think all kinds of things. When he was creating it, all kinds of things. I'm sure all he was thinking was, "God damn, that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer thing. That makes a lot of money. What can I come up with? What can I come up with?"
I thought maybe I was like Elvis or something, like introducing black music to a white audience. Like they were slowly trying to do something nice, racially. But I don't think that. I don't know if they were or not.
Nope, I don't think so. Not one bit.
The other thing I wondered about is why were there no black students in my school?
Yeah.
So last March, I was back in Kansas City for my sister's retirement party, and I went to the Johnson County, Kansas Museum, and it's in the old King Louis West bowling alley.
You're kidding? Wow.
No. Did you go to King Louis West?
Oh my God, yes. I got busted. A cop took my pipe in the parking lot of King Louis.
Yeah, that's what happened to me too.
Were you with me? Or maybe
No. It was something different. It was somebody.
Okay. I remember smoking weed and we got busted by a cop.
Yeah.
In the.
Yeah, I was there one time.
We got let go.
Yeah. Most people in Johnson County or in Overland Park have a lot of memories about King Louis West bowling alley.
Yeah.
And I have a couple that stick out in my mind. One is in 5th grade, my mom again enrolled me in bowling after school.
You're a good bowler.
Yeah. Well, that was my mother's doing. She thought that would open some doors for me. Bowling with rich people, I guess. But anyway, one time we had this hippy dippy, the bus would come after school and pick us up and take us. And we had this hippy dippy.
I had to, we probably walked right by each other. We're probably bowling in adjacent lanes.
But this hippy dippy guy was really happy. And he was like, we got over to King Louis West. He's like, "Hey, fellas, stay seated. I'm going to take you right up to the door, first class." And so he goes driving up there and he wedges the bus under the awning. Outside the bowling alley. Yeah.
Because he was stoned?
I think he was stoned. He was really a nice guy. But we pull it, and everybody else would always let us off out in the parking lot. This guy let us off. He was going to drive us right up to the front door.
Because it was snowing, maybe, and he wanted
and there was a wooden awning. Was
he gone the next day?
He was gone. Once it got wedged under there, he couldn't get it out. It's like, and so we went in and bowled, and when we came back out, the bus was still there. He was gone.
Yeah,
and there was another bus.
You never saw him again.
Never saw him again. Nicest guy. Yeah. And the other time, I got busted. A friend of mine and I opened some beers out in the parking lot. In high school. We had a teeny weeny little bag of weed out there. And we went in to look around the bowling alley. Nothing was going on. And we came out. We hadn't even smoked there. It wasn't enough weed to even get us high. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so we were like, let's just say it. Let's not waste it. Let's put it in with some other weed someday. Yeah. And when we got out, the cops were out there waiting for us. And sure enough, they busted us out there in the parking lot, the cops.
How'd they know?
And they had been around looking in the cars with their flashlights. And they saw the two open beer.
Yeah, the beers. They saw the beers. You idiots.
They saw the beer.
You don't leave your beers in the car.
I know.
God damn it.
Yeah. But anyway, they busted us. And again, like you say, because we were white, probably, they were like, well, we're going to let you go with a warning here.
Yeah, but give me your weed.
And so Yeah, they call it, and it was such a little tiny, like, it's like, it'd be one thing if we had a quarter ounce or something, but it was like just this little tiny, they were like, that stuff that lead you to ruin or something, we could really send you away. And we're like, really? That little tiny, we couldn't even get us high, But anyway, so they call my mom. My mom comes up and gets me. My mom's really upset, which was unusual because that's nothing to compare to what my brothers had done when they were younger.
Yeah.
But anyway, I get home and she had just got back from the police station picking up her boyfriend for a DUI. So he was sitting there in the kitchen, and right when she got home, she got a call to come pick up her son.
Get you. Oh, your poor mom. Oh.
I know.
Oh.
No, it was awful. It was awful for her. But anyway, they put the Johnson County Museum in the old King Louis West bowling alley. And I was in there, and they have an exhibit on redlining. And they also had a book.
That they would have that there.
I know.
I'm surprised they would even be liberal enough to do that.
I was surprised too, and I was kind of pleased to confronting the past, which is what you talk about.
Yeah,
they do in Austria and Norway when you went there.
Yeah, they totally own up to it, and I was just shocked at the difference of how they handled, the Holocaust and the Nazis,
right.
Compared to how we have never ever faced up to our past,
right?
Permanently, so that it's always a part of us, rather than this thing like you were talking about in the 70s. Well, okay, we cleared that up.
Yeah. So I was pleased with it. And they also put out a book called Redlining Cities, Suburbs, and Segregation. And for those of you who don't know what redlining is, redlining refers to the systematic disinvestment of some neighborhoods over others by the federal government and private lenders, largely on the basis of race.
Yeah.
And so the exhibit talks about how, after the Civil War, there were still Jim Crow laws in the South, and there was this great migration of African Americans moved north. And they think that
the exoduster movement.
Right, exactly, which we dealt with in Quick Draw, which was great.
That was awesome. That was,
I'm fascinated by it. But Kansas City became a cultural hub of African American culture at that time. But of course, white people freaked out with all the African Americans moving in, like white people do. And I would say even, during the Dust Bowl.
Even though the only thing that's cool about Kansas City is the jazz and the barbecue.
I know.
That's the only thing that's good about Kansas City.
Yeah. But they were freaked out that all the, people moving in, just like white people always do, they're doing it now even.
Yep.
I would even say during the Dust Bowl, white people out in California even freaked out when other white people from Oklahoma and Kansas moved to California.
Absolutely.
So in Kansas City, one of the ways that white people responded to this anxiety about black people moving in was by intimidation. And we don't really automatically think of intimidation as a white person, think of intimidation in the North, but it was very common. And the book Redlining says that in 1910 and 1911, 6 black-owned homes were bombed in Kansas City. Wow. In the early 1920s, black-owned homes were bombed in the area of 14th and Brooklyn in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Another thing that white people would do is
where Bryant's is. Bryant's Barbecue, right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
But over by the old Monarch Ball Stadium, ballpark.
Yeah. Another thing white people would do is they would send threatening letters to black people, black homeowners, telling them to get out. And then the Ku Klux Klan was actually big in Kansas City as well in 1915. And in 1924, the Klan held a convention where 5,000 people attended in Kansas City. And that's, again, it's like we never...
A convention was held less than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But we're past racism.
Right, exactly.
Crazy.
And if you're white, I don't think you see it. But I have a older white woman friend of mine here in New Mexico one time was telling me, like, well, we never had racism against black people here in New Mexico. And I was shocked when I went to New Orleans one time back in the 50s and saw it. And then later, I was taking a museum course at UNM, University of New Mexico, and I was going through a collection of memorabilia that an older student who had gone to school in UNM had donated to the library. And in there's a scrapbook, and when you open the scrapbook, there's a flyer for a huge KKK rally
Wow.
in Moriarty, New Mexico, in the 20s. And I'm like, again, I don't think it's malicious a lot of times with white people, but I just think that they don't see it because they're not subject to it.
Yeah, we as a culture have never. That's the thing about Norway and Austria. Everywhere you go, there are little brass squares showing where this Jew was kicked out of his house here and put on a train. Like, it's a part of the fabric, so it doesn't become this. It's not an issue in the same way of like, it's the country as a whole has sort of agreed to cop to it. And God, does that make a difference? Because the new generation who had nothing to do with it have this freedom that that we just, I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah.
To me, it's the biggest issue in our country, hands down. And it just, until we somehow own it, we're just destined to like go through these cycles of.
Well, we've been in therapy as well. And one of the things about therapy is admitting who you are. It's almost like the culture needs therapy to just admit it and then be able to move beyond it, but it's uncomfortable to admit it. You don't want to admit it.
But I think just to, and I know this isn't what you meant, but not move beyond it. Just have it be a part of who we are.
Right.
So, because then it can be a part of who we are instead of this this wound that's never, we're never really dealing with it at all.
Yeah. That's a cool point. That's a good point. But anyway, the other way that white real estate developers kept black people out of their neighborhoods in the early and mid 1900s was by deed restrictions and covenants. And developers would write certain rules into their property deeds to keep people of different nationalities and ethnic backgrounds out of certain neighborhoods. And when the National Association of Real Estate Boards was formed in 1908, Article 34 of their bylaws actually said, quote, "A realtor should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood a character of property or occupancy, members of any race or nationality, or any individuals whose presence would clearly be detrimental to property values in that neighborhood." Unquote. And and that's the and for example, and there were other deed restrictions that the book gives examples of, are in Leawood, Kansas, a development. And again, this is nothing against Leawood, but in
I
Leawood,
have
Kansas,
issues with Leawood separate from this.
I cleaned a lot of chimneys in Leawood. I know Leawood very well.
I don't like Leawood. I'm not a fan. They're too uptight.
It's very white.
You can't have garage sales. They have weird rules.
Yeah.
You can't have garage sales. They don't have curbs for some reason.
Yeah, that's right.
And their cops are hardcore. You go a 26 and a 25 and they'll pull you over. At least 35 years ago they did, or whatever.
my brother and I were in a Chevy Suburban, and we went to clean this chimney in Leawood, and we hit the cul-de-sac that it was on, and the house was down at the bottom of the cul-de-sac, and it was right before Christmas one year, and it was completely iced over. And we just started sliding. We were going towards the house.
Nothing you can do.
Yeah. And all my brother could do was try to wedge us up on the this retaining wall next to the guy's driveway. And so we just arrived with like, and the customer came out of his house, but as we're like, And then we stopped and we're like, we're here to clean the chimney.
What were you guys doing in a Suburban?
We had borrowed it from just to work in or something. My brother had it. But anyway, one of the covenants, deed restrictions that they had in Leawood actually said, quote, none of said land or portions thereof shall ever be sold, conveyed, transferred, devised, leased or rented to or used, owned, or occupied by any person of Negro blood or by any person who is more than 1/4 of the Semitic race, blood, origin, or extraction, including without limitation in said designation, Armenians, Jews, Hebrews, Turks, Persians, Syrians, Arabians, excluding, however, from the application of this paragraph, partial occupancy for bona fide domestic servants employed thereon.
Wow.
So you hear that now. I mean, this was out in the 1900s, like usually less than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And you hear it now and you're like, that's crazy. How could that be legal to put that into a deed restriction?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And how does that affect generations,
Yeah. And it's also, we talk about like blood purity and stuff in Nazi Germany and blood quantum, but here it is, it's the same thing there. They're saying like, if you were a quarter Jewish, you couldn't live in that development in Leawood at the time.
Which, by the way, no such thing. If your mom's Jewish, you're Jewish. That's just the way it is. Quarter Jewish. But I know what that means.
So then during the Great Depression, the government created the Homeowners Loan Corporation, whose job was to slow down foreclosures. And as part of that process, the Homeowners Loan Corporation standardized appraisal systems and maps to determine what neighborhoods were good investments. And they did this for 239 cities across America. And their residential security maps basically used a color-coded map system that became associated with race. And so, for example, the top two sections were green and blue, were reserved for white neighborhoods and indicated a good investment. The third section, a yellow neighborhood, represented neighborhoods that were in decline and usually included Italian, Jewish, and other ethnic populations. And then the bottom section was red, and that was used for properties in decline and disrepair in predominantly African-American neighborhoods. And it was this color coding system that gave us the term redlining, because it came off of those maps. And so you ask, why were these neighborhoods predominantly African-American and in decline? Well, it's because African-Americans couldn't buy in any other neighborhoods because of those deed restrictions. And they were in disrepair because all of these banks use these color-coded systems to determine whether or not to invest money in the neighborhood. So the book Redline says the maps were a form of self-fulfilling prophecy. If a neighborhood was ineligible for attractive home mortgage loans from government programs, private lending institutions were unlikely to lend to the area either.
Which then just rolls out into like grocery stores and all kinds of the things that you need in neighborhoods, because they were walls. They were just walls. They were invisible walls.
Exactly. It was, and the other thing, for a community to come up to improve, you need the prior generations to be able to save some money and make improvements, and then you build on those in the next generations. And, a good example is like a good determinant of whether or not someone is going to go to college or graduate from college is if, their parents went to college. And if their parents graduate from college. So again, if you make it to where certain neighborhoods don't improve, then chances are they're never going to improve. You know what I mean? So anyway, I realized all this 50 years later, standing at the Johnson County Museum.
In the same basic neighborhood where you would play the little black elf.
Elven. And it was because of those deed restrictions and redlining that there were no black kids in my school in 1973. And that's why I got the lead in Elvin the Black Elf, like school Christmas play. Like if it had been like no deed restrictions and everything had been level and people had been able to live wherever they wanted and be whoever they wanted,
Yeah.
I probably would have just been one of the fat elves back in the in the chorus. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, anyway.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and that's where the freedom term is just, you know, you just got to own up to it. That's all. I think I think it makes us a better country.
Yeah.
But
it's hard. It's hard to, and it's uncomfortable to think about it. But again, it's like, I mean, that's part of growth, as you acknowledge where you came from, and then you say, okay, I'm going to be a better person after that, or try to be a better person.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, John, I would say, you know, this time if you're at a holiday party and someone starts to say something like, I'm not a racist, but ... then try to butt in there and jump in there and try to tell them the story of Elvin, the little black elf, or try to stop them from saying something completely racist and offensive. So, anyway.
Yeah, let's just admit we don't know everything.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's the big start. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be wrong.
That's what,
all the time. Look at my life. It's gone, you know, I'm still around. I'm doing okay. And I've been wrong all the time. My kids will tell you that.
I'm the same way. It's like I'm comfortable with being wrong. So, and you get better. You get better. You become a better human being. All right, John.
Great job. That was awesome. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
And some peace out there and goodwill towards men. All of those things.
Great. And thank you for joining us, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast and found it interesting.
Yeah.
And if you did, please tell a friend. Be sure to check us on Facebook and Instagram. I'm not as familiar with Instagram. I'm trying to get better with it.
Well, I'm taking some of your posts and putting them out there.
Really?
Yeah, but keep playing with it. It's good. You're doing a good job.
I've never done social media until about 3 months ago.
I know, it's so funny to see you interact with it. It's so great.
So I'm slowly, but please be patient with me, everybody. But
you're doing fantastic.
Well, thanks. Stop buttering me up.
All right, this is human number 2 signing off.
And this is human number 1. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We love you, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody. Thanks.
And Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Okay.